Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
Does everybody know everybody, Katie, or should we do introductions briefly?
I think it would be great to do introductions. And I can certainly start. My name is Katie Watkins Brandt. I am the Sensor Systems Engineer for the Regional Class Research Vessel Project for one more day. I'm actually starting a new position with NOAA as their data acquisitions manager for the fleet. So tomorrow is my actual last official day, but I will continue on in my endeavor for best practices for the fleet, for the academic research fleet and the NOAA fleet as well. So let's just kind of go down the list. Let's start with you, Jay.
Yeah, I'm Jay Perlman. I'm co-chair of the Ocean Best Practice System Steering Group and have been working with Katie since actually the inception of the task team that she's leading, and really find it very rewarding. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. And Pauline?
Yes, hello, good morning. I'm Paul. Oh, I should put my camera on, sorry. I can tell it's early in the morning for me. I'm Pauline Simpson. I'm project manager for the Ocean Best Practices System, and like Jay, I've been very interested in working with the task team on decision trees.
Wonderful. And Laura?
I'm Laura Riamaki, and I work for CERES, which is a joint institute between the University of Colorado and NOAA, and I sit in the Global Monitoring Lab at NOAA. And I've gotten involved in this through OASIS. I've been working on their radiation best practices group, and there was a need for decision trees, so Jay connected me with Katie.
Awesome. And Angela?
So it looks like she wrote in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Here. Angela Gonzalez. I'm a lawyer at the Dominican Council for Fisheries and Aquaculture. Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you too, Angela. And Christian.
Yeah, hello, Christian Munoz, senior engineer in Institute of Marine Research in Norway and steering group member of OBPS. And yeah, very interested in knowing a bit more on how to make these decision trees a reality in the system.
Wonderful. And Laura Stolp.
Hi, Laura Stolp. I work at WHOI and R2R and several best practice groups, CTD in particular, with Katie and Rebecca. And my house is really loud because I'm having trees taken down, so I have to mute. Sorry. Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Laura. And Patricia Lopez.
Hello, sorry, my camera is not working. I'm Patricia. I work at the National Sonography Center in a Ocean Technology and Engineering Group. I'm very interested in related with best practices, and just here to learn more about this.
Wonderful. Welcome. And Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I work at Woods Hole with Laura with the R2R group, and kind of like what she said, I work with the best practices of CTD. And Katie and I were working our decision trees, so this is kind of how this came about.
Yeah. And Virginie?
Hi, so I'm Virginie Vandengen-Bogus. I work basically at the Australian Institute of Marine Science, supporting mainly IMOS in all quality assurance, quality control, data processing. Yeah, I've been involved with building actually best practice documentation for IMOS for our team at AIMS. And so I came into decision tree that made sense to me. And yeah, so that's how it is. Yeah.
And she'll be presenting some great slides too to show you that work.
Yes, exactly.
And Yiming.
Hello, I am Hee-Ming. I'm a data manager for Antarctic GBIF and OBPS node. So I'm here to learn about decision trees and how we can engage users and communities from Antarctic communities for. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. Okay. Well, we are so happy to have you all here. Today, we're kind of going to go through an introduction into the task team for decision trees for best practices and kind of how we came about. I'll give you a quick overview of the session. Oh, sorry, my slides aren't forwarding here. There we go. So I'll give you a quick overview of the session. We will introduce you to the new OBPS task team on decision trees for best practices, kind of what our motivation was, the purpose, the membership, the current membership, the mission, and the timeline. And then what is a decision tree and how could it be useful to best practices? I think that's kind of one reason we're all here, is to better understand that. And then provide you some examples of decision trees from current best practice working groups in the community. And then we'll go into an open discussion. So let's start with introducing you to the task team. What was our motivation? Well, over the past few years at the OBPS workshops, we've heard different groups demonstrate interest in decision trees. You know, how can we use these as tools for to integrate into or coincide with our best practices? Because there's a lot of advantages to the decision trees, which I'll go into in greater detail later. But I wanted to take a moment to consider the theme of the OBPS workshop, this one in particular. How can we develop a framework method for establishing best practices in ocean observing and for gaining endorsement of these practices from the community? And again, I think there is a lot of community interest in decision trees as tools for both standardization and to promote community adoption. So really thinking about these decision trees as things that we can put in our toolbox to be more effective at communicating different processes that we may have integrated into our best practice documents. And I just want to take a moment because and to thank OBPS, because they really are central in bringing various groups together to be able to have these types of discussions. And that's why they are really kind of the center of our honeycomb here. You know, we have all of these different groups that, and all of these representatives from these different groups that are currently on the task team. And I hope that honeycomb continues to grow. Because I think it's going to be important to make this, to think about a previous OBPS theme of convergence, to bring all these groups together and come up with, you know, templates for decision trees, a best practice for decision trees that, you know, the community as a whole can utilize. So I just want to take a moment to thank OBPS because they're great at, you know, bringing together all of these different groups for a common purpose. So we were approved as a task team in the summer of 2022, and the purpose of our task team was to develop recommendations for and templates of decision trees targeting various interests within the OBPS community. And really to assist users in the development of effective decision trees, we want to develop a best practice for decision trees as well as decision tree templates for users to reference and to promote standardization. So we've already taken a moment to kind of introduce ourselves and some of the task team members. This is the current list of task team members. So Laura, myself, Rebecca, and Virginie. So I did want to just take a moment to put a plug in here that one of the reasons we wanted to introduce the OBPS task team to you at this workshop was to be able to get some new members added to our task team. So if you are interested in participating after you hear about what our task team is doing today, please feel free to reach, to email Laura or I or Jay or Pauline. They can get you in contact with us as well. I've included both of my email addresses here just in the event that my Oregon State one gets deactivated. I hope that's not for a little while, but you never know. So it's there. Please feel free to reach out to us. We would love for you to join our member or our task team as a member. So the mission of our task team is really to engage the community in the use of decision trees as tools to accompany or coincide with best practices development. And I think as we've all kind of been working independently in our different groups in developing best practices, we have found that often these best practices can be quite lengthy, right? So it's really nice to be able to have some kind of tool to be able to provide to the community to say, hey, this is a really important process, and we want to give you a quick guide for this process to be able to make sure that it's easily followed, and that will ultimately lead to greater data quality in the future, because you have kind of this standardized format that the community can follow. To gather and synthesize information regarding the development of effective decision trees and formats based on application. I think when I personally started looking at decision trees, I was thinking, oh, how do you create an effective decision tree? It's not something you necessarily think about, but being able to create a decision tree that is effective and useful for the community to use will again ultimately lead to wider scale community adoption. Develop a best practice for decision trees that will provide users with a pathway to developing effective decision trees for their application. And just having a baseline document for being able to talk about how to develop effective decision trees. And then develop templates for various applications that may help users formulate effective decision trees while also providing a level of standardization. So I will talk about some of our thoughts with regards to various purposes and applications here in a minute. So the tree purpose or application, the task team has currently identified 3 purposes or applications where decision trees or templates may be created. And I'm sure there are probably more, and we are certainly open to hearing about more, but these are kind of the 3 kind of core ones that we came up with. So time-based is really providing recommendations where availability in terms of time may be limited. You have resource limitations, so applications where resources may be limited, being able to provide alternative workflows based on that resource limitation. And then procedural, so applications suggesting procedures best suited to application or situation. I'll give some examples of each one of those here. So time-based, this is one that I was particularly interested in with our CTD best practices working group, where we are really focused. It's RVTech, which is the Research Vessel Technical Enhancement Committee. And it's really a group of marine technicians and data managers and other scientists who have come together to develop best practices related to seagoing operations. So these are really focused on what can marine technicians do while they're out at sea to ensure better data quality for the resident sensors and systems that are on board. And when I think about marine technicians being out at sea, they are extremely busy people. So having time-based recommendations for them to say, hey, I have 5 minutes to do something. What can I do to help improve data quality? I have 15 minutes, I have 30 minutes, and so on and so forth. So really being able to provide those guides gives the marine tech a document they can go directly to and say, hey, I can do this, this, and this in this amount of time that I have. And I'll show you an example of a tree that we created for that purpose. So resource limitations. So these are really, again, applications where resources may be limited, providing alternative workflows based on resource limitation. So this one example of this may be power is a limiting factor if you have a radiometer, say on a buoy or a sensor on a glider or float, or where resource limitation is experienced related to supplies, equipment, or access. And then procedural. And this is where I think a lot of us kind of fall into, how do we distill these really complex processes into a tool that users can use that's useful, that are based on, procedural guidelines. So these are applications where data quality may be assessed in the field, or there's a process to determine where a practice is best suited to their application or situation based on a sensor system or working environment. So you'll see a few examples of these as well. So I wanted to give a quick overview of our task team timeline. So again, we were created in summer, I think August of 2022. We are here now where this red box is at the OBPS workshop session. And it's really meant for us to introduce you to the task team and show you some of the templates that we've been working on and engage with you, have a discussion about decision trees, how you might use them, and if you're interested in the development of them. After the workshop, we'd really like to finalize our membership. So bring our group together and have a kickoff meeting. And then I, for one, am very aware of time and very sensitive to the amount of time that some of these groups can take. So we have really set it for a once a month meeting and are hoping to split the group up into smaller working groups based on purpose or application that they're interested in developing templates for. We hope that'll help reduce the workload, and then so those smaller groups would create a template and then bring it to the larger group for feedback and kind of an endorsement kind of process. And we kind of cycle through all of the different groups, but everyone would be responsible for providing feedback on the templates and also working towards an overall best practices document. The idea being we would have deliverables ready by the end of next summer and be able to present our deliverables at the OBPS workshop in 2023. So moving on to kind of what is a decision tree and how could it be useful to best practices? So a decision tree is really the ability to visually outline paths to potential outcomes. And I made this little depiction here. I've been making a lot of decision trees lately, but just to kind of show just the very basics of a decision tree. You have a root node or a decision node, and this is really your primary node where all other decisions, chance and end nodes branch from. You have internal nodes. You can have multiple internal nodes, and this is really between that root and leaf nodes. So these are your branches, and these include decisions or outcomes. And then you have, you can, like I said, have splitting where you have multiple internal nodes, and those may divide into two, not toe, or more nodes, which may be, another internal node. And then you have leaf or end nodes. So these are really the end of the path or the outcome, and this denotes the outcome. So this is a very simplified kind of just terminology of a decision tree. And really keeping in mind that, prune when necessary. I thought this was interesting to think about. Just like any other tree, you need to prune it. But this is in relation to really trying to think about removing irrelevant data, because complex trees can become cumbersome and it really reduces their effectiveness. In terms of advantages and disadvantages of a decision tree, with regards to advantages, they're transparent means to provide a clear method for decision making. These are really nice, quick guides to be able to interpret data in complex processes. And we have a lot of complex processes that we need to be able to distill. And this is a really great tool for being able to do that. They're good for visualizing both numerical and non-numerical data. In many cases with our applications, this is non-numerical data. We're trying to distill processes. Easy and flexible to create. They require little time and few resources. You'll see a couple of different open source tools that we've used to develop decision trees. And that's one great thing, is that you don't need a specific software to be able to do it. There are open source tools available that are at no cost. So we are also looking for if the community has any additional tools that they've come across with regards to developing decision trees, we'd be happy to hear about it. And it's easy to define the rules, right? These are just, yes, no, if, then, else statements. So it's really thinking about that process in a simplistic way, and being able to deliver that to a user effectively. The disadvantages, too many decisions, as I said, with pruning and overuse of irrelevant data can lead to complexity. So just really being able to pare it down to the crucial information needed. Can be unstable if data within the tree changes. This is the same with best practice documents, right? I mean, these are actively evolving documents. So it's the same with the trees. And not really relevant to us, but interesting to think about for predictive analysis, other tools such as machine learning are more powerful. And, this is kind of a machine learning is a decision tree, right? So it's just a decision tree in its most simplistic form. So just decision trees for best practices, why are they important? And this is reiterating a lot of the previous information, but it's really allows for a focused approach to visualize a path involving a complex process. We have a lot of those to be able to distill, and this is a means to do so. Templates to provide standardization of decision trees based on purpose or application. I think if we can come up with these templates for the community to be able to use, the more and more that these templates get used, the more used the community is to seeing them, working with them, understanding them. So I think if we can come up with templates, it's really going to help with standardization of practices. Quick guide for often complex best practices. Like I said, the document I think we're working on is like 20 to 30 pages. And I'll tell you what, a marine tech is not going to have the time to sit down and read that. So if we can provide them with a tool to say, hey, these are important processes, and we'll show you a couple of examples of those. Here is a quick resource for you to be able to follow, and something that will ultimately help produce better quality data. And then a tool to promote community adoption and over time process improvement. So it's again, just really having, people being able to see these and work with them and get used to them, I think will help with community adoption as well over time. And then my last thought on this is really, work outside the bubble. And I think we all have been so focused within our own groups of, developing best practices, but we all have this common interest in decision trees. So I think it's been really useful to kind of bring this task team together and start to meet everyone who has an interest in the development of decision trees. And I think rather than thinking about this more locally, as we have for the most part with our VTech and the development of our best practices, but thinking more globally and, form this kind of global initiative to develop best practices for decision trees that can help promote convergence and further standardization in the community as a whole. So that's my pitch for decision trees and best practices. So I wanted to take a moment and just share with you some examples of decision trees that we currently have underway. And we're going to start with Laura. She's going to provide an overview of what they've been doing for OASIS. All right, take it away, Laura.
Sure. So I was asked to come up with some decision trees for things like determining the right radiometer to use on your platform, whatever it might be. And so I was trying to find a good platform. I see, using platform in different ways, using a good template to start with. And I decided to try LaTeX. So Katie and I have been playing with a couple of different tools. So this one here is an online thing where you don't really need to code the LaTeX yourself. You enter kind of the information for your tree in this little box on the top right of the slide. So you go to this website, you enter in the kind of the information from the tree, and you can make a few adjustments to the formatting, and then you can create a tree just like that without a whole lot of effort. So that was one sort of tool that Katie and I played with a bit. And then Katie, can you go to the next slide here? And then I decided to try a little bit more complex LaTeX tool. So there is a package that allows you to kind of make these sort of tree type graphics in LaTeX, and I used an example and I adjusted it for my purposes. So this is hot off the press, my first attempt at a decision tree to help folks choose the right pyranometer for their platform and their science goals. And I think it's a pretty clean format. It's a little bit more complicated to use than that online web tool. So it took me a little bit more time to figure out where to put stuff. But I think it made a nice figure in the end that I can use in a publication. And I'm happy to share that code with anyone who's interested in playing with it as well. So yeah, so then it just gives you an example here of what if the fundamental question, that root is, you know, what pyranometer should I put on my platform? What are the important questions you need to ask yourself about the motion of the platform, how accurate the measurements are that you need. And then that will help you direct you to sort of what type of pyranometer you should buy for your platform. That's pretty straightforward. I think that's what I had, Katie.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Laura. Okay, so I want to share with you the RV Tech decision tree, the time-based one. And this one is obviously a little different than what I would think about as a decision tree, but this is kind of what my brain came up with when I was considering if I were to be dealing with time-based recommendations for procedures, this is something that I could follow. So this is one that, again, is for the CTD maintenance, and this is something we're working to develop for the RV Tech CTD best practices document. And it's really meant to show kind of over time, you know, if a Marine tech, you know, during post-deployment, you know, you either have a fast cast turnaround or you may have, you know, say greater than 15 minutes. These are some of the things that you would do during that period of time. A couple of the things we thought about was, okay, this is built into a larger, more complex document. So can we provide a link to where this information is in greater detail within the greater best practice document for them to be able to go in and say, click on the link and get to that document if they wanted more information. The other part of this was thinking about supplies, right? So for this particular process, for what we would be asking them to do, there would be a specific kit available so that they could just kind of grab it and go. And then thinking about over time, you know, say they have 30 minutes, they would do the post-deployment procedure plus these additional procedures. Greater than 60 minutes and then post-cruise, all with the kind of the same idea as they keep building based on the amount of time that they have. So this was kind of a first order effort at thinking about, okay, for procedures where you wanted to be able to give a little bit more detail and outline, you know, what they would actually be doing. This was a way to kind of visualize that and be able to say, and you need this kit to be able to do it. So grab this kit to kind of help keep them efficient with regards to time, not having to fumble for supplies. So this was just one example of kind of time-based decision tree. And then we have another decision tree within the RV Tech CTD group that's more procedural. And it's really meant to help the tech set up and configure for a CTD cast. And, you know, many of the problems that I know Becca can speak to and Laura Stolp as well with regards to quality can really stem from this setup and configuration process not being done correctly. So this idea of this is how you would prepare for a cruise for CTD cast, you know, set up the software. Are these things done? Yes or no? Being able to, you know, run a CTD cast. One of the bigger things too is naming convention, which seems quite simple, but with regards to naming convention, you know, a lot of times that can get screwed up, but later down the path, it really affects folks who are trying to quality check that data. And then kind of going through the process of all the way to the point where you're actually finally getting the CTD in the water for an actual cast. there are all of these things that need to occur beforehand for to help result in quality data. So I'll just ask Becca if I missed anything here, if she wanted to chime in.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Like you said, one of the big things for like CTD best practice is trying to get the crews and naming conventions correct. Because going back after the fact and it's just a bunch of numbers is very hard to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, perfect. All right. And now we're going to switch over to Virginia, who's going to give you background on their work with decision trees for best practices of mooring data QC.
Thanks, Katie. So yeah, just here a little bit of background first. So this is about 2 years ago that I started with the IMOS, Australian National Mooring Network, which is wanting to have like more best practice documentation for what we are doing, basically. So just a brief detail about IMOS, Australian National Mooring Network. Basically, it is one of the facility of IMOS, and IMOS is actually part of Goose, one of the regional islands. And we have basically 5 different nodes across Australia. So it's widely spread around from Tasmania, New South Wales, Queensland, IMOS, which is actually also involved in the Darwin, so North Australia and Western Australia. And then you have the Western Australia and South Australia IMOS. So basically we are looking at, we've been looking at the data quality assurance and QC, quality control on a delay mode. Although everything is actually well standardized, we're following the FAIR principles, which is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. And there's actually a lot of variability across the network. So basically why this variability occur is because of the environmental conditions. So we're going from deep sea to shallow waters of the tropical, the Great Barrier Reef, for instance. We have different type of instruments. So in the case of, for instance, ADCPs, is a variety of type of ADCP that we're using that might be different for deep sea mooring compared to a shallow water mooring. And also the capacity, some in South Australia, for instance, has such type of boat infrastructure and have the ability to go out or not, depending on the weather as well, constraint. But also there's different type of infrastructure across the network, and obviously the people. And so the idea was to build those best practice documentation, but given the fact that all of us are actually a little bit spread around and following the best practice for their little community, we wanted to bring that together. And so we needed to find out about some way of converging these best practice into one best practice for the IMOS Australian National Mooring Network. So yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. So here's basically a little overview of what I had thought about the planning for the quality assurance part, and then I go up a little bit more in further details for the quality control. So basically it's following a workflow kind of schematic, and which is actually having some part of decision tree because it has some inclusion of having to make a decision. So going ahead with the plan. So for instance, we go from the planning to the deployment, to recovery, data handling, and then data QC. And in the planning, there's a key decision to be made there. So basically, as I said, all nodes have delivered already their best practice manual. And at the moment, we are it's still in the review and actually being finalized, and hopefully it will be delivered soon. So that's for the actual more the QA part of the for the IMOS mooring data. And then there's also this data QC that is actually going on at a second stage, if you want. And that is actually well represented by this little schematic here made from AODN, and which involves basically you have multiple, from a mooring, you retrieve multiple data files and that are collected and put in a folder. And then you have, on the other hand, a lot of metadata that is put on a database. And all this is getting into a toolbox, the IMOS toolbox, which is MATLAB based, basically. And that gets you some NetCDF following the convention from IMOS convention for the NetCDF files. So between those, well, within the IMOS toolbox, actually, it includes pre-processing and QC automatic system. But I will talk a little bit more about that on another slide. Can you please go to the next one? Thank you. So here we're going to the QC. So, and I'm specifying here that we're talking about mooring data QC, but on a delayed mode, because Quartet is actually not much better, but it's actually well renowned for any real-time ADCP data QC. Here, we had this specific case that basically we brought up over some meeting that we had within the community of IMOS to basically trying to build some best practice for QCing ADCP data. And basically why we focus on this one is because there's about perhaps 100 ADCP instruments within Australia. For instance, and half of the time, basically, you would have half of that number in the water. So they're all rotating. For instance, for AIMS, so the Australian Institute of Marine Science, we hold basically about 34 instruments for IMOS, dedicated to IMOS, and there's about 10 others that are for other type of projects. Around Australia, there's about little experts and managers in QCing ADCP data, and there's loads of all the time new users, they come and go. So there's a need to have experts and delivering basically a best practice that new users can be following. And there's also, as I say, there's a lot of variability within IMOS in terms of flexibility, in terms of environment, the type of instruments. So we have ARIA, NORTEC, Aqueduct, MARITS, and also different NORTEC instruments as well. So yeah, but we need to remain so flexible because all those instruments may have specific needs in terms of QC and processing. So we need to allow that for taking that into account. And so Building best practice documentation should enhance objectivity and standardization for performing quality control of ADCP data. And it's been actually a IMOS priority in that regards too. So how to bring this up and what is the best way to proceed? So we basically convened a workshop on last December, so it's about a year ago. And we thought about building up a decision tree to allow for remaining this, allowing this adaptability of instruments of environment that has IMOS around Australia. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'll show you this little schematic of the process of the IMOS data for moorings. Basically, so you can actually think that this little schematic is actually very simplistic. Obviously, there's lots of different pathway and links and procedure that we need to go through within this IMOS toolbox. And this include, for instance, like having compulsory also pre-processing routing or automatic quality control, or do we need to apply some manual QC at the end of it? So basically, I came up with this little decision tree, and as Katie actually mentioned to me, it's this is quite good because it's quite colorful. So yes, indeed. So if you follow the green line, basically that's mean that everything is okay, and you just like might continue go through, and you can deliver your data to AODN, the Australian Ocean Data Network. But if there's optional, that needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And if it's red, basically it's a no, and so meaning that you need to revisit the whole process. Can you please go to the next slide? So basically, what we did, so before going into that workshop, we basically team up. So this involved Rebecca Kohler from CSIRO, also Pete Janssens was involved in that, Hugo from Saudi, the South Australian South Australia, and Simon Spagnol from AIMS as well. So who are basically, like Hugo, Simon and Pete, are much more expert in terms of QCing ADCP data. We have multiple meetings. We basically start also to build a decision tree. And we start before the actual workshop, we send a survey. So to allow us to understand a little bit more about the variability, about the needs from everyone, and the number of ADCP instruments, the number of different type of instruments, etc., and the requirements of everyone. And then during the workshop, we did a presentation, basically highlighting the challenges, the needs. Also pointing out that it's important to share what we know, what we do, and how we do it, and then we may need to update some the wiki page of the IMOS toolbox, basically to solve some problems that we encountered. And basically, we looked at defining and agreeing on tools that are required to perform ADCP QC. Some yet are readily available within the IMOS toolbox, but some are not, so requiring more software, and that may be specific to the instruments. and that would need to have some perhaps more integration. And we needed to define and agree on the step-by-step procedure to apply, and with knowing, understanding what these steps are and what to do and how to apply those correctly. And this is especially for non-expert, and making sure that new users, non-expert, understand those things. And while the processing steps should be clear and perform in a standardized way, given some variable, so environmental conditions, say settings of instruments as well, within the IMOS community, flexibility and adaptation, again, here is required. Can you go to the next slide, please? So basically, we built a decision tree, which is a procedural decision tree. And we use actually a GitHub, so open source Mermaid for doing this procedure and this decision tree. I'm not going to go into the details because it's quite blurry there, but basically within that decision tree, you have, you know, the different big steps to be done, and that can be also revised and over time, and update over time as well as needs come to it. And my thought also, you know, when doing this and doing a lot of coding as well, these decision trees actually making sense is particularly for mooring data accuracy, but perhaps other sampling protocols or any, in terms of technology as well, because it's like algorithm development. It's like also decision tree learning, and those are used for making a lot of making decisions, and also develop modeling procedure, and yeah, so basically the definition actually of algorithm development is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculation or other problem solving operations, so which is similar here in that regard. So decision tree for best practice. Yeah, so can you go to the next slide? So yeah, so this is to have the procedure that we did over that workshop. So we went on to that team up. We did the presentation, and then during the workshop, we follow up with an agreement and endorsement process, which was basically going really on a step-by-step, questioning the community, asking, are they doing the same things? Is there something that they want to add? Is there any issues that they want to raise or anything like that? Do we need to add a branch there? Do we need to add, you know, anything like that? So we really went and through that decision tree that we built, and then we defined an action plan. So for updating anything that we needed to do, etc. So everybody had their task afterwards. And then, yeah, finally, we're in the process of writing the best practice document for the QCing of ADCP data. And the IMOS toolbox, well, the AODN has been providing already a review of the IMOS toolbox with improvements implemented from this best practice, well, from this workshop. Next slide. So overall, and as Katie and the others have been like highlighting, so basically decision tree is helping decision making and problem solving, and might provide conversions in ocean best practices. I really believe that. And it is also a process of questioning and reasoning, understanding what are we wanting to sample, what we're looking like, if it's like temperature, sea surface temperature, or it's like salinity in the water column, or nutrients, and where are we going to do that, etc. So it has this questioning and reasoning that needs to be applied, and it's quite adaptable, and it's also a sustainable scheme, because over time, as new technology will come, we might just be able to adapt this decision tree. And what I'd like to point out as well is that challenges like climate change, pollution in the ocean needs really a standardization scheme on a large scale, with data, with high quality data that can be used and flow from best practice that have been built. And for instance, if I want to compare, what's happening in the US, in the ocean there, and what's happening in Australia, well, I need to know that those data has been flowing the same process from, the sampling to the actual QCing, etc. So that is really important. And I would like to raise those questions as well, like that I've been always wondering, it's how things are done elsewhere, I know IMOS community, okay, but how things are done in the US, for instance, and why are they doing that way? And then at the end, obviously, can decision tree be used for conversions of ocean best practice? Those are questions that I'm hoping to raise and follow up with the discussion part. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. I will emphasize the colors comment. I loved that idea. I thought that was really, really great. And this idea of pruning, right? It declutters those, statements, those yes and but if else statements, and simplifies it to a color. So I thought that was really great. And then, you made another comment too about experts, and many times, we are developing these best practice documents, and other experts are involved in doing so. But the value of a decision tree is that a non-expert can come in and distill the information quickly. And we deal with that a lot in the marine tech community as we get new marine technicians coming into the fleet. So just emphasizing that as well, that's a very good thing to think about, is that we're experts creating the best practices, but these tools are going to be utilized by people who are not experts. And this is a really efficient way of doing that. So thank you for that presentation. That was great. So we're now on to this open discussion. We have an hour that we've allocated for discussion. So I just wanted to take a moment and open it up for any initial questions or comments before we start talking about some of the discussion topics we have. So, Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a fascinating issue, actually, and it's good to have all the three overviews that you have guys presented. I was just wondering how this can be, and I'm sure you have been discussing that for a while. How do you foresee this being scaled up at a higher level into the repository? For example, when a user, as you said, a non-expert needs to find a best practice, and one of the big questions that we always have, all right, you have 2,000 elements in this repository, what is the best practice that I need? So how do you foresee these trees being developed at this level to find out the documents, so it can serve not only for finding the document, but again for identifying those clusters of documents that could serve for this convergence methods to best practices? That's kind of the question, and of course I suppose that because Goose has already, with all the EOB's approach, started this kind of way of standardizing this, right? Depending on the time scale, the space, or which is the platform where you are sampling and the level of accuracy or uncertainty that you need. There are identified certain methodologies, and so is at a certain point this also being contemplated to kind of in a high level establish these starting points where to start diving into the repository?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the tools that could be used for identifying them would be tagging them, right? I know at some point OBPS had talked about developing different tags for finding things easily within the repository. So being able to tag them for, say, decision tree, right? This is a decision tree. What are the available decision trees out there that could link them to those best practice documents? Or are they endorsed by Goose? So that could be another kind of tag that's related to the decision tree. So I don't know, Pauline, if you wanted to say anything about that or ways that to be able to connect these decision trees to at a larger scale within the repository.
Yes, it's certainly all possible. It probably manually, it's a manual exercise to do that linking and tagging, but it's certainly possible within the software that we use. Yes.
Okay.
Because it's right that now we have lots of tags of different elements. We have SDGs, we have the OBs, we have maturity levels, we have, of course, areas of expertise, and we have keywords. But it's still kind of soup, so that there's no logical layers established like the ones that you are presenting, of course, in this procedural time series or so. Yeah.
If you, sorry to disturb, if you think about using perhaps like some keywords of what represent the best practice. So if you are asking all makers of best practice to provide, perhaps 5 keywords, and then from that, those keywords can be tagged along as well, and getting that into a search more easily. That's perhaps one way. Also,
Yeah.
You mean like connecting keywords from bigger granularity to smaller, like oceans, physics, temperatures, like going from a major topic from a major level topic to a finer granularity? Like,
yeah, so you're going, yeah, and you can think about also like providing questions. So if you ask questions, okay, where, where your, where's your interest, your region of interest, or what is your instrument of interest, or what is your variable of interest? And then from there, you build up more questions. The more precise you are with your questions, the better you will have a refinement process that can happen and that can match and find the relevant best practice.
So Christian, have you worked with developing any decision trees, or do you plan on, or do you have groups that you're working with that are planning on development of decision trees?
Not in my case, I would say right now. No, not really. No, I'm not specifically focused on developing this, but it is right that it's this question has been, I think that decision trees may be very useful to really detangle some knots that we have in the system, like the convergence issue, like the defining what is the best element, for example, to a certain application. So these are two questions that have been again and again every year stated by our users, by our community. And despite the fact that we, of course, try to address these issues year by year and approaching more and more, it's still, to me, it's still a hard bone that still needs to be
Yeah.
a long way to be digested and really launched forward, or at least is my point of view on this.
Yeah.
So definitely, that decision trees might really become very useful here. If not other techniques, as you mentioned, like the machine learning, or so that may become more fuzzy in this way and not hierarchic. But,
Yeah.
But that I don't know. But certainly that's a very good work that you are doing, guys, and yeah, definitely it will become very useful for the system.
Wonderful. Did anybody else have any other comments? So, Virginia, you said, you know, if anybody has any comments on how things are done elsewhere and why. And can decision trees be used for convergence of ocean BPs? I think Christian spoke to that a little bit, that, yeah, they could be great tools to help with both convergence and be very useful to the community. So I don't know if anybody had any insight on those in particular.
And I would like to ask as well, in terms of decision tree, and that's my question as well, with how, you know, with the overall process with best practices, it's always like, okay, is it best to go? And I raised that question perhaps 2 years ago in the Ocean Best Practice Workshop, but I still like coming to my mind and wondering, okay, is it, should we go with variables, or should we go with instruments, or should we go by specific procedure on methods for an application that is needed? You know, and you have, you know, the oceanographic science community, but you have also private industries that would, you know, be interested in how to do, you know, how to do things for their purpose, and so that can be useful as well for them. So having, you know, non-ocean scientists and being able to use this decision tree for their purpose as well could be of interest. So, you know, the wording needs to be also easily understandable, and yeah, so that kind of things. Yeah, I don't know, what's the best way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've taken some notes here. Yeah, and I think the nice thing about decision trees is that you can be very flexible in creating them with whether it's, you know, a variable or an instrument or a procedure. That's one of the nice things, is they're easily creatable. So Christian, you got your hand up again?
Oh yes, actually, no. I think that Virginia's comment is very appropriate, because it's this multiple dimensions of what is your entry point to this tree, and for sure, depending on who is asking, the entry point is different, right? If you're interested in data collection, for example, is all right. What do you want to measure? What is your time scale? What is your spatial scale, and what do you need it for, right? But But if you're asking, depending on which step of this kind of value chain, whether it's more related to data management, particular things, or at the very end, if they are particular applications, like how to build an observing system or how to create a big pipeline for whatever. Yes, the entry points might start from different ends, and that definitely the filters help out, but I don't know if you can then suddenly make that this decision tree mutates in layers. So depending on the entry point that you have, then the questions kind of mutate to other branches. So if you start from the observations, then the next questions are these questions. But if you start from the applications, then you
well,
get
the
into
application can link observation. The observation can be linked to the application. And
yeah,
you
exactly.
know, it's like linkage that needs to be done. It's really like creating, yeah, kind of some data mining and algorithm, and that, yeah, which can find links in between each procedure.
So I guess we should think about that when we do begin to develop the best practice for this, as well as the templates, is, you know, how these are locatable within the repository itself, and thinking about those layers and how to filter them appropriately. That's a good thought.
Is this something
I like
already
Vinny's.
has?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Valerie. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I like Vinny's suggestion of having some mandatory keywords in any of the publications. But how do you police that? How do you, you know, make that happen? But that's a very good idea.
Well, you know, for instance, just my thought, maybe you were linked to that, but when you write a publication, you are often asked to provide up to five keywords about your publication. And so that helps actually searching when you're Googling. And I don't know exactly how it is in the background, but yeah, I'm sure it is used for searching.
When I just had a quick look in OBPS just to see what was there under decision trees. Some came up and I put one in the chat, but they're also called decision guides. So, you know, suddenly we're getting different terms being used for the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I just pulled that up. Yeah, take a look at that.
So what is this, Katie? Sorry.
This is what Colleen just put in the chat, and this was the MPA guide decision tree. This is just a supplementary figure. But that's a good point. Probably part of the initial should be a kind of dive into the different terminology that's used for decision trees. I've heard workflows as well. You know, thinking about, is there a difference, or are these terms interchangeable, would be a good first order effort to do as well. Yeah, thank you, Colleen. That's a great point.
Yeah, if I may, of course, one of the big advantages that we have, or what we have been trying to develop, of course, it's been this networking and using all the ontologies to really scrutinize the content of the documents and start linking concepts and methods between them. So far we have now like 6 ontologies into the repository. I was wondering, Pauline, how is this evolving in terms of increasing the number of ontologies inside to be able to create these connections? And then you're muted, Pauline, sorry.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, and we already have a couple more ontologies or vocabularies that we want to add, like worms and the aquatic sciences and fisheries abstracts vocabulary thesaurus. So, but any suggestions like that, we will upload them. So that's worth, if you find one that is really very focused on a need, then we can certainly use that. I mean, we're using the C DataNet, we use MV, we use JEBI, SDGs, but there are more out there, and if we can identify them, then we can upload them. And then that's automated tagging, which is an excellent process rather than manually doing that.
So Becca, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but with NERC and the new actions controlled vocabulary, is there anything that we could possibly use within that for, you know, kind of adopting a controlled vocab for decision trees?
Potentially. I mean, they're very open to being a resource and kind of being like a catch-all for things. So it might be worth approaching them. They don't have anything specifically that I can think of that would be under this domain, so they'd probably have to create a new thing. But they're very open, and I'm sure we could talk to them about it.
Okay. Yeah, just a thought there with thinking about adoption of a controlled vocab.
Yeah, they would probably do some research to make sure there's no other controlled vocabulary for this, but I'm sure they would be willing to adopt it, definitely.
Okay.
Because in your meetings or up to now, when you have been discussing on decision trees, have you been talking of kind of one single tree, so to speak, or having kind of a forest of different? Is it something that you have been discussing, or? And now I am asking this from my total ignorance on the matter.
No, we have not really discussed that as a group yet. So we've really, you know, coming together, it's right now, really. I mean, this is one of our first kind of group meetings. So I imagine that will definitely be a topic of conversation for our first group meeting. But yeah, it's a good point.
And Christian, you can actually think about the forest, and actually there's some theory or practitioner who think so with knowledge of like trees communicating by their roots.
Yeah.
So no other level as well.
I'm thinking of some
Everything's
very cool,
linked.
Yeah.
Linked.
I'm thinking of some very cool depictions for our TATS team page of a forest of decision trees so that you can click on and choose. So thank you for that. That's great.
But that's right. Certainly this concept of communicating through the roots could apply very well here.
Yeah. So just a thought, one of the discussion topics was if there were any kind of specific purposes or applications we hadn't thought about. You know, we had the time-based, the resource limitation, and the procedural. Those were kind of our core ones to start out with. But if there are any comments on others that we might not have considered, we're certainly open to that.
Well, when you talk about procedural, does it include also anything related with spatial and temporal dimensions? It's all included in this procedural approach?
I think it certainly could, yeah, fall under that. You know, I kind of struggled with the time-based recommendations I had was also procedural, right? It's actually kind of both. So you're kind of like, oh, which one does that category fall under? So in thinking about linking them as well, I could see that falling under both in terms of a template that could be used for time or procedure. So yeah. Yeah, thinking about those overarching schemes, though, I think, you know, time, resources, and procedural cover a lot of ground. There's a lot of things that can fall underneath those.
And I think that, you know, those three concepts are to me quite interesting. And you could think of actually, you know, if you have your web page and you're looking for, you know, procedural, time-based, or, you know, looking at basically those type of decision tree, and then going into, okay, from procedural, you can find this, time-based, you can find this, and etc. So that could be a good start as well. Just, you know, but simply having those buttons that you can click, and then from that you have other questioning or other buttons that you can choose from, and then you go on and on. It's of interest. And in terms of the time base, I actually really enjoy that one actually, and I found that's quite interesting because of you know, often project management. So that's comes into that part basically. And you gave the example of the tech, you know, if they have a bit more time, they can do this, or they can do this extra work or not. But then I'm thinking, okay, well, what's the probability of having, you know, that the 5 minutes, you know, procedure will be followed compared to the actual 60 minutes or more, you know, it will be followed. It just like feel like, to me, you know, there will be more higher probability that the 5 minutes will be followed compared to the 1 hour. And that's an imbalance there that we need to be careful though. But yeah, I guess not a little bit is still good. It's better than nothing. Yeah.
And I think one of the important things for this group to consider is, you know, we all kind of work within our own smaller groups, and it's, I think developing kind of beta testers, you know, these trees, get them out into the wild and actually see how well they're followed is going to be an important part before being able to, you know, before actually publishing some of these. Just give them a try, you know, find a subset of people to actually follow the CTD one and see, is it useful? What was confusing? You know, get that community feedback as well. I think is going to be important. We should try to integrate into our work, our plan for best practices. Because you're right, who knows if someone is actually going to follow that 60-minute procedure, or be like, oh, I have an extra hour.
Well,
am I really going to care? I'm really going to go.
It's just like whether that's going to ever happen, you know, just like, you know, what's probability that's happening, you know, more than the actual, you know, because the job needs to be done still.
Yeah.
So, you know, it needs to have this balance somehow, that to make sure that those jobs are done. Yeah.
I guess the value is if you are looking at a decision tree and you're referencing it for your 5-minute protocol, you're seeing that there are 30 and 60-minute protocols as well that you should be following. So maybe that's the, oh yeah, I should be doing this as well. A good reminder too.
Yeah.
Well,
You mean-
certainly we have now in the repository, because Yiming was suggesting in the chat to have a look on the Jamboard from the eDNA session. And for what I read there, what I see is, of course, in more or less completeness, but we have a lot of keywords and categories defined within our metadata in the repository. Some of them are more empty, some of them more populated, but I'm sure that with the material that we already have there, I wonder if there could be a room to start designing some of the layers with what we already have.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we should reach out to the omics people and see who wants to be on the decision tree task team. It looks like they could find use in
Yeah.
decision trees as well.
Yeah.
You mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I hope I was able to follow the full conversation. I was a little bit I'm feeling a little bit unwell. Anyway, I'm fine. So I was in this omics eDNA session. They were talking about minimum information for an omic protocol. And one of the example that Pierre Luigi put in the chat is hopefully having this MIOP, you can use the information, the metadata from this MIOP to filter for protocols such as I need the protocol that costs within this budget that normal citizen is able to use to get those protocols. So I wonder if similar approach can be used for this decision tree testing. Maybe have something like MIOP, but for best practices, where we can extract metadata from all the best practices and then use those criteria to develop a decision tree. That was my idea. Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's feasible within 1 year with 1 hour of meeting per month, or maybe I'm just too ambitious, but yeah, it's just something pop up my mind. Yeah.
No, that's great, but I could see with something that would be possible was like is in this omics jam session document, is that you could click on one of these things that would lead you to a decision tree. And I love the idea of being able to extract metadata. That is ambitious, but very cool idea. And I never strike down ambition. So I think it's something that we should keep in our back pocket for thinking about how this could evolve and what this could evolve into, and how OBPS might help us develop something like that if that was a tool. But I think that's a great idea. And yeah, I'm all about ambition. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. So like what Christian mentioned, probably what was it? Was it keywords or terminology could already be part of the metadata? I don't know. I haven't used OBPS much, so I'm not sure.
But the vocabularies, the mapping to the vocabularies are actually done against the full text. It's not just the metadata that is supplied for the document. So it scrapes, if you like, the whole full text. But I do like your idea of working with the eDNA, the MIOP, because it looked very, very sophisticated. But remember, OBPS is so broad, whereas they have a very, very specific use case.
Yes.
And I'm not sure we could replicate that. Just to respond to Katie, looking to the future, we are actually going out very soon for a developer to actually auto-ingest metadata from journal articles Okay, just that's the first step. But then the next step is to take metadata, auto ingest metadata from unstructured PDFs. That's a much more difficult issue,
Yeah.
but we want to start addressing it and seeing if we can get some funding and some time to develop that, because I think one of the barriers to getting practices into OBPS is the time it takes to actually manually input it. So we are looking at those things, Katie, but you know, it all takes time.
Yes.
And
sure.
money, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pauline, is there any, actually, you never heard about any software that can do that automatically? Software
Yes,
that can do,
well-
can uptake words or keywords or specific parts of a PDF that you actually can set,
Yes.
and then it can take.
Yeah, there is something called GrowBid, okay? But they still have to look. The problem is, and I use the word unstructured, because what it works on is structured PDF, i.e. they know that the author is going to be in particular places. It's the unstructured PDF that's going to be the very difficult. Journal articles, I don't think are going to be a problem, because we've got, you know, we can pull off from DOIs and all sorts of metadata. But yes, there is software out there, but I think it would have to be much more sophisticated than that to accomplish. But we have it in our sights. I just wanted to assure Katie that we're not sitting here expecting everybody to manually do something forever. Because I have to say, with protocols, and I'm sure you all know this, protocols seem to have many, many authors. Now, the most I have seen is 70. The most I have had to contend with actually inputting is 52.
Wow.
And that's just not, it's, you know, we have to get over that. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. They need
the
to find out an automated process, that's for sure.
Yeah. You see, people say, why do you need all the authors in the author statement? But if you're author number 65, you will want that article or that publication to be found under your name. So, you know, good metadata in, good metadata out. Yeah.
Yes.
So, sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, any other comments? Some of our other topics for discussion here.
I've got a question. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name. Is it Virginie?
Oh yeah, and people in Australia call me Vinny. So
Okay.
just but feel free to call me Vinny, it's easy.
All right. So I was really intrigued by your presentation. It seemed like a very mature stage in developing this decision tree. And so I was curious, as you were putting this together, sort of what fraction of your time and energy went into the mechanics of putting together that beautiful picture, and what went into kind of making the decisions, and what was it primarily about, just getting all the people in the same room to agree on what the best practice should be? If you could tell us a little bit more about that, right? Does that make sense?
Basically, well, the preparation, we had lots of meetings actually in terms of preparing the actual decision tree. And that was mainly done, there was the task of Rebecca Cole from CSIRO, because she is one of the most expert actually in terms of QCing DCD data from our moorings. So she was given that task, but with the help of suggestion from all of us, all the names that I put there. And then, yeah, so that specific decision tree that we built using this mermaid. Look at that. And then after that, over the presentation, it was basically a workshop over 3 days. So the first day was just like really introduction. Second day, we went on perhaps more with what is ocean best practice as well. I mentioned about the ocean best practice over that workshop, and mentioning the importance of using best practice and developing best practice. And for this case, to be able to have, you know, a nice standardized way of QCing our ADCP data. And then in terms of really this agreement and endorsement, calling that process is really, I mean, I shared those slides, but those slides are hectic because I've been like updating as I heard, you know. So basically I had zoom in of any little steps that were on this decision tree. So there's lots of slides I went through, and yeah, people were, you know, discussing, and I was like, really, if I was not hearing any response from anybody, I really mention their name and saying, okay, Tim, you don't have any thing to, how do you do in your team? No, well, because we know each other. So I've just been like really asking more personally if I wasn't hearing anything, because I really wanted to have at the end of that workshop, having an agreement on this decision tree and what's going to go on as well, like for the improvement of the IMOS toolbox, which is what we use within the community. And that's important as well, because that's the task that the AODN will take on afterwards. So they need to know what are the priorities. They need to fix this, you know, this QC system. They need to fix, they need to add a parser. They need to integrate this software from these instruments, and etc. So it goes into, you know, lots of details there. But yeah, so it's, yeah, so that was the last day basically, where I took, you know, time into going through that decision tree basically.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the reasons that I'm asking is I was thinking about our task as a group, right? And what is it that we could do to make this easier for other folks who are just starting this process? And since you've kind of lived through the whole thing, right, figuring out the content and making a pretty decision tree, and then getting the community to agree on it and working through the approvals, right? That part, what could you have used? If somebody had handed you something at the beginning, what would have been the most helpful?
Yeah, I don't know there, but I think what I would like to perhaps from this task team is more about, could we perhaps build a concept, and, you know, with an example, like are we choosing more like an example of procedural, or are we using that's the thing I don't know, like that's something that I think we decide. It's like, are we using perhaps a CTD? Everybody got CTDs everywhere around. Can we do, you know, kind of like a decision tree from a CTD that is actually from everyone? You know, in Antarctica, in Arctic, in US, in everywhere. And is there already, you know, best practice on CTD process on the OBPS? And can, you know, I'm just thinking about CTD because it's been like, you know, classical oceanographic tool. But, you know, it could be anything. If you think about a variable or something like that, that could be, or that maybe is must used within the OBPS system. I don't know what is the must search, you know, best practice. You know, something that could be of interest there, and then starting building from that, having a concept, trying to think, can we apply that to the actual OBPS repository, and or is that going to be like just only, are we wanting to just apply that for just a best practice on its own that would do the conversions process and show that procedure there, or I have no idea there. So I don't know, like this is something to discuss, I think. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Before we lose some folks, can I get everyone to turn their cameras on real quick? We've lost a few, so I thought I'll get our snapshot now and then we'll have that done. Everybody, 1 second. If you're there and you can turn your camera on. All right, we'll do it in 3.
There's Frederick as well. I haven't heard from him, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Are you there or not? Just like seeing names. I'm just like looking at if there's anybody else that it's been coming up over.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
Yeah, we just
Yes.
wanted.
Sorry, I was on another meeting. What is the question?
Oh, we just wanted to
sorry.
see if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Frederick Bonung. I'm from West Africa, from Benin. I have a PhD in physical oceanography from Brazil. So my interest is on coastal erosion, coastal dynamic, wave propagation, using observation data, mainly camera video system. Also, we use also satellite data and modeling data. So that is all. Thank you.
All right, so we were going to see if folks would turn their cameras on for a moment so we can do a snapshot if you have them available. If not, that's okay. And all right, so we'll take one in 3, 2, 1. All right, let me make sure I did that. Okay, looks good. Everybody's got happy faces. Wonderful. Okay, sorry to pause the great discussion there. I just wanted to make sure I got that done before folks skipped off to some other meetings. So Christian, I think you had your hand up before we took that detour. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was just probably, I'm not sure if it's more kind of a wrap-up question, or is what do you think that you need on the next phase or during the next few months to move forward? Is there anything that you need? I mean, I identified certainly that you need more people because you were clearly doing that request from the beginning. But is there anything you feel you need to move forward with this very relevant work?
Yeah, I think task team membership is probably number 1. It would be nice to get representatives from some of the bigger groups at OBPS who have, you know, best practices that are actively in development. I think that would be of value for a couple of reasons. One being, you know, they're actively working on a best practice document. So if they could generate a decision tree in parallel to those efforts, then we could get some decision trees out there for the community to actually try out and test out. I think that would be a huge help to actually being able to get endorsement from the community and community adoption. I think also too is going to be doing a dive into existing resources that may be available for the development of decision trees. We saw Mermaid, we saw Latrix. So I think being able to understand what's already out there so we're not reinventing the wheel, and what is available and user friendly, because we want these applications to be able to be easily utilized. And I think that's also going to be an important task to get done right away. I don't know if Laura or Virginia or anyone had any other comments about that, but those would be, I think, some of my top priorities in the near term.
No, no, I was just looking at the actual timeline. Maybe you can put up the timeline.
Sure.
Just to read through actually what is the timeline there.
So next month is really after the OBPS workshop, drafting kind of a report from our discussion here. And finalizing the membership, and then kind of having a kickoff meeting with an introduction in December, review of our terms of reference. And then January is really the kind of start. We are hoping for a decision tree expert. We have been actively seeking someone, and we reached out to a few folks. One response, and he's happily retired, so we're not going to bother him anymore. But we do have a query out to another group that actually focuses on decision trees. So any recommendations, if anybody knows any decision tree experts, we would certainly love to hear who they are and try to reach out to them, because I think that will be important, even though in many cases our decision trees are much more simplified compared to what they're used for at that level, which is usually, manufacturing, processing, things like that. I think it's still applicable, and risk analysis is a big one. They use it for risk analysis. So some of the decision trees can get quite complex, especially with the experts, but I think it'll be important to have that insight within our group. So that's another goal, is to try to bring someone like that on to the task team.
The thing with decision trees is a lot of brainstorming as well. With it depends on the topic, I would say. But it does involve a lot of brainstorming, and I've done that actually a lot for building those little workflow decision tree. And yeah, and it's asking questions as well, like really a lot of questioning. So it would depend on the topic though, yeah. And having perhaps expert in the topics in addition to the expert of decision tree, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else on the timeline?
No, so you actually have within a timeline you actually go by decision by type of decision tree as well. I'm seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's totally flexible. This is just kind of a initial thoughts on how we might go about this. So
no, that's great. Yeah, that's good.
It kind of gives groups deadlines and things they can work with within that time period. So
I'm far from being an expert on this, but I think that to me sounds very reasonable that it's a complex and vast thing. So starting from very targeted solution approach, I think it's good. So the way that you have defined these three types of approaches to entering the problem looks reasonable, because actually otherwise you get lost in a vast amount of
So my decision tree process was good. I ended up at a good outcome here. That's good. Oh dear. Yeah. That's great. All right, I think we are almost 10 minutes before the end. So I just wanted to open it up, and any other kind of questions or comments folks had. If anybody would like to commit to membership, I'd be happy to sign that deal now if you'd like to, if you were interested in being a part of the task team. So. Anything else from anyone? All right. Well, a big thank you to Becca and Virginie and Laura for presenting today and sharing the examples of the decision trees. I think it's a good start. It's a good first talking point for us to be able to have a look at them and think about them. And I will work on establishing a Google Drive where we can kind of share all of our information with each other and kind of bounce ideas off of each other as well. So I'll share that in the near future. Otherwise, any last minute comments? You mean, yeah.
Yeah, all good on my side.
Yes, I just want to thank you for organizing. I think it's really important. I'm very sorry that I can't commit because I'm really very overworked, but I would love to follow up if there's any minor things that I can help, if there's any mailing list or something. I put my email in the note document, and if you could reach out, or I could reach out to you, I don't know, whenever I can.
Yeah.
So I just want to say I really appreciate your effort, and I hope that you're not discouraged that the group is pretty small right now.
Oh, it's okay. It's a weird, it's a busy time. Everybody's very busy. So I totally understand. But if you do know anyone within your group who might be interested in joining, please provide their information. Please provide them our information if they would like to reach out and join the task team, because it would be really nice to have, global representation.
Yeah, I will be in the marine biodiversity capacity building meeting. So maybe I can say, hey,
put a little plug in. Yeah, we would love that.
Maybe
Awesome.
they would be interested in they could come up with good questions on the application of decision tree. Then it could be useful for the entry point for the decision tree, I guess. But I can ask.
Yes, that would be great. And you can tell them how wonderful this conversation was, and it was recorded if they wanted to be able to go back and see.
Yes, I will tell them Katie
Thank
and
you.
Virginie and Laura and Christian are awesome, and maybe they can consider joining the task team.
Thank you.
Oh, this is recorded. Okay, good. I'm gonna timestamp this and send it to them.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. Okay,
Thank
any
you.
last minute comments? Anybody else? Christian.
Well, anyway, I definitely I wouldn't commit more than Yiming at this moment, because I'm also quite entangled already with OBPS in other tasks with other working groups. But yeah, definitely in for brainstormings, for everything that is not steering on that, feel free to contact me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
When it goes to steering things or providing more manpower, then I can find a compromise right now, because
Yeah,
I'm already also entangled. But
totally understand, and I appreciate your feedback and your participation in the discussion. That's a really useful feedback. So thank you.
I think, as Yiming said, I guess that you are engaged in something that is very, very important, and I am sure it might provide a great value for the system once it's up and running. So all my best wishes for that.
Great, thank you. And if you know anyone within your group that might be interested,
I'm thinking on that. I'm thinking on that, but I'm not sure. I know some people, but I know also that they are 3 times more entangled than me. So I don't know how to approach for them. But but I'll keep an eye open on
Sounds
your short-term needs of specific experts.
No, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll close out this session. And thank you all. I really appreciate it. And yeah, decision trees.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for the organization.
Of
Thanks a
course.
lot.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Bye
Bye, everyone.
See you.
Yeah.
Bye.